social media age has definitely allows misinformation to spread more quickly, but these biases that make us susceptible to misinformation have always been around, and there's always been examples of misinformation since the early human days when we had storytelling or the printing press. Like there's always people sharing false things.
Welcome to Barenaked Money, the podcast where we strip down the complex world of finance to its bare essentials, with your hosts Josh Shellick and Colin White, portfolio managers with Verican Capital Management Inc.
Welcome to the next episode of Barenaked Money. We're excited to have another exciting, interesting, fascinating guest today. And as you know, with Barenaked Money, Colin and I are always pushing back on the information that's out there, pushing back on the narrative, pulling back the shower curtain to show you what's really the truth behind everything. And we have the perfect guest to talk about this today. We have Matthew Facciani joining us today. He's a social scientist, author, and a self-described mythbuster, which is particularly exciting. And he's currently a postdoc researcher at the University of Notre Dame. And his work dives deep into why we believe what we believe and how misinformation spreads, often spreading faster than the truth, and what we can actually do about it. And it's a great time for him to be on because his latest book, Misguided, tackles everything from conspiracy communities to AI-generated fake news. And I think it makes a pretty compelling case that we need to sharpen our critical thinking. So, Matthew, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So we're excited to have you. I think I'd like you to start just by telling us why you wrote this book. And I think that'll set the stage for so many other things that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so I wrote this book. I started writing it in basically the fall of 2020. So it's almost been 5 years now. I just finished graduate school. I had the pleasure of graduating right in the middle of COVID-19, so that was a challenge. And I really thought about how much my work studying political polarization and how people process misinformation and information, how connected to health. So originally I was thinking about writing like a blog post or a op-ed or something that connected my work and public health. And I did write some piece in the conversation about how our identities can influence our attitudes on masks and mask wearing. But then I was thinking, oh, maybe I could write something else. And I was talking to a few of my friends about it, and some of them actually suggested that it might be worth trying to write a book. And this is something I never really thought I would do, especially this early in my career, maybe ever, is actually write a book. But I had time to write out a proposal. So I was working at Vanderbilt University as a researcher, studying health and information, how people process health information, in addition to a few other things. And I basically just sent out a few cold proposals to presses and publishers. And I didn't think I'd hear back, but I'm like, I'll give it a shot. I'll see what happens. If not, I'll just write, another op-ed or something and kind of move on with my research. But there were publishers that responded very positively, and I got a contract with one of them. So that's basically, I kind of stumbled into it, to be honest. I didn't expect it to happen. And I landed this contract early 2021 and kind of slowly wrote the book. Um, it took longer than I thought for several reasons, but it ended up being good that it took so long because it allowed me to update it and keep it very relevant and timely because this stuff changes so quickly. But I was able to add in basically a lot of my most recent research with the latest revision that I sent in. So that's kind of the backstory of how I got in there. And I hope that I am able to bring the science of misinformation research to a broader audience. And that was the goal of the book.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Congrats on writing the book. First of all, I think that sounds like it's one of those oh shit moments where you kind of put it out there and we're thinking that nothing was going to come back and they say, oh, this is a great idea, and you're like, okay,
Now I have to write it.
now I got 5 years of work ahead of me. But I want to dive in more to one of the things that you mentioned there, like our susceptibility to misinformation is driven to some extent by sort of the social circles and social identities that we have.
hmm
And it got me thinking, is our susceptibility to misinformation, is it more related to what you talk about as social network, social identities, or is there something ingrained in us personality wise that makes us more susceptible to this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's definitely a variety of factors, and it's hard to really tease out what percentage of each contributes to each misinformation susceptibility, because then there's different types of misinformation we're more susceptible to, and that's another bit of my research that I dove into. So the short answer is it's kind of all of it, and for different aspects, there might lean one way or the other is going to be more relevant towards your social identities versus cognitive styles. Um, but both predict a susceptibility to misinformation. So there's this whole body of literature diving into analytic styles. People who have these cognitive styles that are more analytical tend to be less susceptible to misinformation than those who are more intuitive. So that's one like personality cognitive component of it. But that's a very malleable personality trait. It's not something that's necessarily as fixed, and you can teach people to be more thoughtful in how they consume content, which is a good thing. It's nice that we can see this change with some education. But with social identities, it's definitely very impactful when it comes to processing information that directly conflicts with an identity that's very important to the individual. And especially this is the case when we have a small set of identities that all overlap with each other and reinforce each other, and we derive a bunch of self-esteem from this narrow set of identities. And that's something that I try to make the point throughout my book is how we can be especially vulnerable to misinformation when we have several social identities that are all important to us and all overlap with each other and kind of have this amplification effect. And that's when we become most vulnerable to believing falsehoods.
I love having an expert on because these are topics that we've talked about as pure amateurs for a long time, and I just want to run like a way that I've kind of conceived of having this conversation with people, and by way of describing that the human condition is kind of tribal. Everybody's looking to belong to something, and
Hmm.
depending on where you are and who's around you at that moment. And for a guy where the pretty girl is, that's where you want to be part of that pride, whether that is, based on location or whether it's based on sports team or whether it's based on a unique belief, right? And, so there's a sense of wanting to belong to something that I think is pretty fundamental to human development. And
Yeah.
there's a bit of happenstance as to what and we all belong to more than one tribe. Like I'm a Maple Leafs fan and I'm a basketball fan, and there's different things I identify with. And you're right, depending how deep that identity is as to how strong I would perceive it, the ideas I feel are very similar.
Mhm.
Is describing this as the humans need to belong to something. Does that resonate with the kind of research that you've done? Is that another way of looking at it?
Yeah, definitely. So it's definitely we have this need to belong and find community, and more directly, it provides us with a source of self-esteem. So these identities, whether you're a sports fan or you identify with a certain political group or religious group, not only do you get the social components, the community components, but they provide you with a structure to navigating the social world and meaning and roles to adhere to that reduce uncertainty. And when we behave in certain ways that align with these identities, it can give us a self-esteem boost. So it can even be like if you have a student identity, let's say you're a student at university and you get a good grade on an exam, that makes you feel good if you care about being a good student. So it can have this very like positive reinforcement effect. And a lot of times it can be very positive for our well-being and how we navigate our worlds. But it can also cause problems whenever we have a very strong association with a particular identity, such as a political identity, and we really want to support our political group. And then we see some criticism of that group, and then we may not want to respond objectively to that criticism. And maybe that means we believe something that's completely false because we are so committed to protecting that source of self-esteem. It actually feels like a personal attack sometimes, whenever we see information that challenges how we see ourselves.
So you've written that misinformation has really existed for centuries. It's nothing
Mhm.
new. But I think if you ask people, the knee-jerk reaction would be that let's call it fake news or misinformation, whatever you want, whatever term you want to use to describe it, is more prevalent today than it's ever been. Is that true? or is it maybe some type of availability bias that just because things are more accessible to us or more in our face, that it seems to be more prevalent than ever? Because I could certainly push back and say I have more access to fact check
Mhm.
things than I ever have before. And so my thought is that maybe there shouldn't be as much fake news or misinformation as there ever have. Maybe this is like a golden age for actually factually correct information.
Yeah, it is a bit counterintuitive that while we have more information at our fingertips than ever before, we also have people believing a lot of falsehoods. And I think part of that is that it's much more easy to see false information online. So if we're on social media, we see the most sensationalized posts rise to our algorithmic news feeds. And just the information that people can get has a lot less gatekeepers than before. So it used to be where if you wanted to share something fake, in the last few decades, you have to go on television and go through producers and all that stuff to say whatever nonsense you wanted to say. Now you can just post something with the internet connection and a phone. Like it's very, very easy to share false information. And if you say something that you know a group of people are really going to identify with, again, thinking about those social identity biases, then they're going to like it and share it and amplify it. So the social media age has definitely allows misinformation to spread more quickly, but these biases that make us susceptible to misinformation have always been around, and there's always been examples of misinformation since the early human days when we had storytelling or the printing press. Like there's always people sharing false things. It's just now we have access to them a lot more. So you have that double-edged sword of information where we have a lot more access to good information and true information, but we have a lot more access to false information as well.
But just to take a little bit of a slightly different lens to this again, because I'm always fascinated by what's the business model,
Hmm.
because if you follow the incentives, then you tend to begin to understand how certain things dominate other things. And it seems to be that there's a lot more money in spreading misinformation than there is in providing accurate information. Is that
Hmm.
is that an observation that fits with the research and the way you've looked at things? Is this as simple as there's money in it, therefore this is what's proliferating at the pace it's proliferating right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it. Not only is there really great money to be had in sharing falsehoods that make people feel good, but there's not a lot of money in sharing good information. So like
We're familiar with that for sure, right, Josh?
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
Yeah, so I mean, so I'm kind of curious about the financial angle of it because, like I'm sure you're aware of how, meme coins and penny stocks, like this has been around for years and years, this idea of like get rich quick schemes. It's the same thing with sensationalist misinformation on all kinds of topics, where again, you're really selling emotions to people. You're making them feel good, you're giving them hope in some way. So again, the political example is so easy, especially in the US. We have these two political teams, and you can just lean into one team or the other team and get a big audience by saying this team is good, you're doing good, and the other team is bad. Um, and the information that is more nuanced and thoughtful doesn't provide that emotional support in a lot of ways. So it's really tough because just practically, if you want to make a career and make money, it's so much easier to just lean into sensationalism and misinformation, especially political misinformation these days, and just lean into that and not care about the veracity or accuracy of your claims. But there really isn't a lot of infrastructure for sharing good information. Like it's really hard to make a career being a science communicator, for example. This is something that my science communicator friends and I often talk about is just the lack of funding. A lot of us just do this for free. So if we see a scientist sharing summaries of their work or their field, they're usually doing that for free in their own personal time. So you have people who dedicate their lives to studying this topic and then they want to share it with the broader public and they get paid nothing to do that. And then on the other side, you see people who get a heavy incentive to share false things that make people feel good. So there's this complete asymmetry.
Yeah, I've always described it that the market for get rich quick ideas far exceeds the supply. and
Hmm.
markets don't like a vacuum. So a lot of stuff gets manufactured. And that's where we find ourselves, because if there's a customer, somebody's going to manufacture it. And that cycle just keeps repeating over and over again. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up meme coins and penny stocks because that's like the epitome of everything that we're talking about here. Like there's a totally fabricated story in a lot of these situations. And I think to the meme coin part of things, especially, there is somewhat of a social identity behind some of the
Hmm.
meme coins. So it's like, there's Trump coin now and there's
Hmm.
Dogecoin, and there certain types of individuals or groups would follow those different coins. So there's definitely something to that. This probably wouldn't have hit your radar, but just this morning, a paper up here in Canada was reporting that a prominent researcher in Canada, a market strategist, his name was caught up in a sort of get rich quick pump and dump penny stock scheme. And the information that was out there, there's advertisements on social media and all that promoting him as a backer. And he came out and said, I wasn't backing this at all, but a lot of people got caught up in it. And it turned into people asking for like their phone number, and they were communicating on WhatsApp saying go buy the stock. And it's stuff that you look at it from outside and say, this is insane. How can you fall for something so silly? Like, no prominent researcher is ever going to text you on WhatsApp what stock you should buy without any financial benefit to them. But all kinds of people, it sounds like, have got caught up in this scheme.
Yeah, it's wild. I did a little bit of research on financial scams in my book and just in my own curiosities. And I mean, it's a $1 billion industry, just scams, and it's probably underreported because a lot of people
well,
have shame like reporting this, right? I mean, you guys probably know the numbers better than I do on that.
so I think we set the stage here. This is bad. This is evil. Now you teased something. I think you teased it in your book. You've teased it here today, that there's a way to protect yourself 100% from misinformation. So are you going to give us the silver key to the city and tell us how to protect ourselves in every aspect of our life? I'll just shut up and you can talk for the rest of the podcast if you have that to give us.
Unfortunately, I don't have 100% silver key to protect yourselves from misinformation. I think there are evidence-based strategies that can reduce their susceptibility to it. I alluded to the identity component, which I think is a huge part. And when we think about identities, one way to protect ourselves from misinformation is not being so reliant on a single identity or a single set of identities that share a bunch of characteristics. And you can do that by simply trying to diversify yourself as a human and get a variety of interests, a variety of hobbies, meet a variety of people. So that way, whenever your favorite politician, says something that people criticize, you don't feel like personally attacked by it and you have to defend them. And you can think about other identities that you have to rely on the self-esteem and meaning that's derived from them. So it sounds pretty straightforward, but unfortunately, again, especially in America, we have these huge political identities that really just take over how people view themselves. And I wish there were more opportunities for people to meet different people from different backgrounds. So they're not demonizing those who they think differently because someone on social media told them that they should. And that would require some sort of funding model where we can actually meet people in third spaces. So, not just going to home and work, but some kind of community third space or program where you actually have an opportunity to meet different people and have that kind of buffer against political misinformation is a big one. But then there's also a variety of tools, media literacy tools, digital literacy tools that can teach people these steps and these tips and techniques to critically analyze information as well. So my book does dive into some of those strategies, and so my own research tried to develop these short pre-bunking games, what we called them. So not debunking after the fact, but trying to pre-bunk beforehand.
Pre-bunking. There's a word that's going to make it into my vocabulary. Pre-bunking.
Yeah, it's a cool word. Yeah, I really like it. Um, yeah, because the idea is to present people with examples of misinformation they might see in the future and warn them about it and teach them how to recognize that ahead of time. So then when they see it, they can recognize it and be like, oh, this is something I learned about. These people are trying to manipulate me. Emotional manipulation is a big one. So again, like trying to play to your political identity or present a sense of urgency. You need to buy this right now or else you're going to lose money. So, trying to look out for those things ahead of time can really help people reduce their susceptibility to believing false information. So there are strategies. It's just a matter of getting these resources to more people and then also aligning that with the diversifying of social identities so they're not as biased by the social identities that they have.
Matthew, you have so stumbled exactly into our kitchen because when it comes to financial matters, we talk diversity all the time. Diversification can protect from a lot of things. It's beyond fascinating that that was your response to that question. I don't know, Josh, I got chills. I don't know about you.
Well, this whole podcast, the whole premise of this podcast is basically pre-bunking, right? Because what we're trying to do is identify some of the issues that arise for people on the financial front and that challenge or compromise their decision making. And we're just hoping to share a little bit of information that will avoid some of those pitfalls that people might be faced with.
Yeah, I mean that's great. I mean, financial stuff is also a hobby of mine. Like I read a few financial books and I, was interested in cryptocurrency for a while, and I just find the whole thing very fascinating. I guess most of the stuff that I've read is with Jack Bogle. I guess I would identify as a Boglehead. And actually, do I cite that in my book because there's a study that kind of mentions index funds. So I thought it was kind of cool to throw that in there. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see. I like the crypto space and the meme stocks and the meme coins and just like how it all intersects from a financial perspective as well. It's been interesting to see.
Yeah, certainly a lot of these misinformation ideas kind of manifest themselves within the financial realm because as we talked about, it is somewhat of a money-making endeavor in a lot of
Mhm.
different ways. But coming back to the crypto thing, it seems like at least one of the rationalizations for crypto existing is sort of a mistrust in institutions.
Right.
And to me, this seems to be somewhat of a demographic thing. Like it seems to be changing. The trust in institutions seems to be correlated in some way with your age, so to speak. So has something changed? And I would expect the answer is no. Has something changed in our brains that is making the younger generation or cohort less trustworthy of institutions? Or is there something else that's going on with the way that information is presented that's making this happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think trust is a huge thing, and another central component to misinformation more broadly. And I do think there are a few things that has happened for the younger generation. I mean, millennials, like we saw the financial crisis, like we just get out of college, then we get the financial crisis, and then kind of growing up, we see, 9/11 attacks, and then right when we're like getting our, adulthood careers going, COVID hits. So I think a lot of people my age and younger really saw these huge pivotal moments of institutions failing in different ways, and failing them in different ways. I mean, especially like if you were told all you got to do is get a job or get a college degree, you'll get a good job and everything will be fine. And then you go to college, you get a bunch of debt, and you can't get a job, and then all the markets keep crashing. I think that financial insecurity leads to a lot of distrust in institutions, and that lack of financial security makes people really angry and looking for something to outside of those existing institutions. And to connect it to the isolation issue we have really across the world, but especially the United States. There's some interesting research that when people are not interacting with others as much, they tend to lose trust in other people more, and in institutions more. So again, I think if we could get people together and not just individuals talking to other individuals, but individuals talking to their local institutions and having this like meaningful two-way dialogue, I think that would help rebuild trust because it wouldn't be this top-down talking down to people. It would be trying to learn what's going on in their communities and then working with them. So I guess that's a long-winded answer to saying yes, I do think there's a lot of factors that contribute to this mistrust. And then social media, you get in your bubbles more and it kind of amplifies that. Um, so I think there are a lot of issues and some legitimate criticism of these institutions as well that leads to mistrust and then presents a lot of issues with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the mistrust is well founded. I mean, you referenced 2008, and that was a failure of the system. And
Hmm.
it's been painted as lots of different things, and we've kind of glossed over it. And I think the challenge is when you gloss over things like that, the population loses faith, and they should, because there was no ramifications of what came out of 2008 that should have happened, and there's
Yeah.
a systemic failure of a lot of different things. Yeah, so I think that the system, I mean, us old people tend to blame the younger kids. I don't blame them at all. The younger generation went through some stuff that was really stupid, and it was at a formative time. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think that we're reaping what we sowed a little bit right now. But again, you teased something else that was really interesting with regards to tools. I'm curious about that. If we could, do you have an example of any of these tools? Are these like websites or, where would we direct our listeners to go to find these kind of things other than the show notes that will show up underneath this podcast?
Yeah, so I definitely can give you guys a bunch of links for the show notes. So the News Literacy Project is a really good free resource website that provides a lot of media literacy, digital literacy tips, and is constantly updating for giving people strategies on how to better navigate their information environments. One of the best like short strategies that you can learn for boosting your media literacy is what's called lateral reading. Have you guys heard that term before? Um,
No.
so basically you can think of vertical reading as you click on an article and you read through the article like down. So you're just looking within the contents of that article. But then lateral reading is you're looking across different types of sources of information to fact check that original article. So you see your article pop up and you're like, okay, this is written by XYZ. And then you Google XYZ and see who that person is, what conflicts of interest they might have, what other people are saying about them. And then you also Google the website that published the article, see what other people are writing about it, how reputable it is. And you're always looking across and then cross-checking the information within that article that you're seeing. And this is what professional fact checkers do. It's a technique that's been taught at different classes, different universities, and it has been shown to really reduce people's susceptibility to misinformation. So again, it's kind of a tough thing to ask people to do because it requires a little bit more
A
effort.
lot of work. That's a lot of
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge with a lot of these techniques is like you can you can teach these skills, but sometimes it is resource intensive. What I mentioned earlier, it was we developed these pre-bunking games. So it's like a 5-minute game that teaches people these skills. And after we found that after people play these short games, they do get better at recognizing misinformation. The long-term effects are tricky though. So they usually require constantly reminding people to make sure they are durable over time. And again, it, if they're finding information that directly conflicts with their ideology, they might not be as motivated to do the fact checking or lateral reading in that particular instance. So it's tough because again, it all comes back to those social biases. Like you can learn how to fact check, how to critically examine media, but then you find something that conflicts with your political identity or your favorite meme coin, and you don't want to maybe necessarily do the critical thinking for that. And that's always going to be a challenge.
One of the strategies that I developed, because again, I started life without computers, and so I've had to adjust as things have gone along. But the algorithm thing and what I get fed is
Hmm.
something that's very noticeable. So I will make a point of clicking on things I completely disagree with, or Googling things that I've got really no interest in, just to kind of break the algorithm so that I don't get into this feedback loop of only reading stuff that align with the way I'm thinking. I want to hear like, oh, I'll go to news sources that I know to be completely a different perspective and just click on them just to say I
Hmm.
did, to try to interrupt that feed that would normally come to me so that I don't get stuck in a tunnel. Because when you walk around in the world, you want to be able to converse with various people in the world. And if you're completely oblivious to what their point of view may be, it makes it tougher. So I don't know how effective I've been. I do get weird stuff on my news feed from time to
Hmm.
time, but it's kind of one of the little tactics I've picked up that I think is making a bit of a difference in what I get fed in the run of a day.
Yeah, I think it would. I think it would definitely balance out your algorithm. And I think just that practice of thinking about different perspectives is like training a muscle to be protective against reactionarily accepting some information that might align with your ideology. So it's tough because this does require some practice. You know, it's a habit that you need to do. And again, it kind of speaks to the original uh, topic we were discussing of like this asymmetry between the easy way that just makes you feel good in the short term, and then there's like long-term habitual process and training. Um, so I'm constantly thinking of ways to make this more accessible and easy for folks. So I'm not just like saying, oh, you know, you need to like take this like class or something to learn how to navigate the internet. Um, so I think there are strategies to make it easier. But again, it's kind of like those social biases are always in the background. And those feelings of uncertainty and financial insecurity and inequality, like as long as we have those components, that's always going to create this underlying risk to believing misinformation.
Let's say you're the czar of social media. I'm giving you this title.
Okay.
And you can impose anything that you want. You can wipe out social media, you can destroy the algorithms, you can impose fact checking on all this stuff. What would you do? What would you do to make these places a little bit more friendly and a little bit less misinformation driven?
Yeah, well, that's a lot of responsibility. I do think there are
Use it
some,
wisely.
yeah, there's a couple things. I do write about this. So there's a couple things that I feel like would help. One, I would like to increase transparency of these companies. I think that's like a nice starting point. Like, you know, let's dive into that black box of the algorithm and see exactly how it works, share it with the public, let independent researchers study the platform so we know what's going on. There's been a big reduction of that lately, which is a really big bummer.
A
Um,
reduction in transparency, you mean?
and yeah, access to data.
Access, yeah.
Um, yeah, so it used to be like Twitter, old Twitter, you could sign up to get their API pretty easily. And now it's like super expensive and really hard to get. Same with
Well, Elon
Meta.
has to make his money back, so
Yeah.
can't blame him,
Elon's
right? He
yeah, he's
spent what
trying.
$40 billion on it. He's got to make his money back somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how many people have bought it because I think it's like 10,000 a month or something. It's outrageous how much money it is to get access to the data. If I could wave a magic wand, I would say if you're going to have a big social media company, you have to be able to share your data with independent researchers and tr be as transparent as possible. Obviously, that's not always in the interest of shareholders to do those kinds of things. So, you know, it's a challenge. Um, but I think that would be a good starting point. And then, but we know certain things could help. Like we could add more friction to social media so we're not constantly like doom scrolling. The infinite scroll that's kind of developed in these social medias platforms, I don't think is a good thing. Um, so social media is tricky. There's this whole, you know, conversation of like if it's a net positive or net negative. And it's really hard to quantify and make it in a one, is it good or bad? Because it's both good and bad. Like it provides a sense of community for a lot of different people, provides information, but it also does tons of terrible things. It, you know, can reduce mental health and, you know, spread misinformation and a lot of really mean comments. So I think adding some friction would help where maybe it's you have, you know, whenever you post something, sometimes there was that box on old Twitter that like would ask you like, did you verify this before sharing? Like those kinds of things actually did reduce the amount of falsehoods being shared. Um, Even ideas of like if you're scrolling for a really long time, eventually your scrolling gets slower and slower. So then you're not as likely to stay on it for like hours and hours, like things like that. Yeah, just trying to get people like outside more. So again, like having them take breaks and they're not in this infinite scroll. Because that's what I really worry about in this attention economy, that these social media platforms, they just want to dominate like every second of your attention and just constantly pump ads. And this 100% growth mindset of that where they're just constantly trying to take every free second we have. I don't think that's good for our society. So I think there's a way to have healthier social media. I think certain platforms are trying to give more user control, which is good. So like Blue Sky is a new platform where there's a lot of customizability. You can really change your algorithm and the feeds that you follow really easily. I think that's really cool. So I know you said like magic wand, but I'm still thinking within the constraints of what we have in our world.
Of real life. Okay.
Yeah. So I'd like
Yeah.
to see more platforms like Blue Sky, emerge that are more decentralized, where users have more control. Um, and the concept of the Fediverse is interesting to me. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. The idea of like different social media websites talking to each other. So if I post something on Threads, maybe it will be able to be seen on Blue Sky and vice versa. So that kind of gets people out of their echo chambers a bit, and allows you not to be so focused on one platform. It also prevents just one platform if it crumbles and it's destroyed. Um, so there are a few ways that we could help the various problems from these social media websites. The community notes that's been popping up on Facebook, Meta, I guess I should say. There's some benefits to these community notes. People tend to, there's some research showing that people actually trust the community note more than a fact checker label. But it's interesting because the community notes are usually community noted from a professional fact checker. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic there, how that works. Ideally, these professional fact checking organizations would work in tandem with the community notes and the companies, and there's like a partnership and dialogue there because they're really good at, diving into the information. So there's a few things I think would help, but it's tough. It's tough when you have these like mega corporations that have so much power and there's so much they have such a responsibility to keep their lines going up. I mean, I guess if I could wave a magic wand, I would make it so they'd be okay not growing as quickly. I guess that's kind of
Well, I didn't give you that much
Okay.
power, Matthew.
yeah,
Oh,
no.
so you want to change all people everywhere. Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Hey, so he started with the magic wand, so I'm staying within that framework.
Well, I love Josh's youthful enthusiasm and his audacity to think that we're going to fix the system. I'm sitting in the chair going like the system is what it is. I can help some
Mhm,
people. Like I can equip some people to win this fight.
mhm.
Because Netflix was on record as saying that their number one competitor was sleep. Right.
Yeah.
So Netflix was trying to
Yeah.
convince people to sleep less, and that was going to be good for them. And so yeah, I think greed is going to be greed. And
Hmm.
I'm not sure that there's a systemic way to correct what's going on. I am confident, and I'm a big fan of books like you've written to try to, for those who are motivated to try to better equip themselves. I think that's absolutely an attainable goal, and we can try to
Hmm.
run up the numbers there. And if we're successful enough in getting enough individuals to behave a little bit differently, the big companies will follow because the business model will come out of that. And at the end of the day, like it or lump it, I mean, business models are what rule the world.
Hmm.
And so if you're successful in your career and getting enough people to be acolytes to a different way of thinking, then there could be a whole ecosystem that builds up around it, and we could begin to shift the sands a little bit. Josh's magic wand thing. Oh, come on, dude, really?
Well, it's interesting that you sound somewhat optimistic, Matthew, that we would be able to kind of alter our behavior in a meaningful enough way to make a difference. Because in some aspects of behavioral finance, some of the authors and researchers in the space have said that even though we're aware of our biases and tendencies and that these exist, it still doesn't help us make better decisions at the end of the day. But you seem to think that there are a few things that we can do structurally and process wise that can actually make a difference into how we consume news.
Yeah, I think so. Again, it's tricky to see the widespreading effects of individual changes like on a social media platform. But we know through experiments that if you teach people these skills and then show them misinformation, they're better able to identify the misinformation. So we can identify on the micro level. It's like, okay, we can teach people stuff. Okay, that's good. And then it's a matter of getting it at scale. And I think that's really the challenge, is reaching a variety of people. And again, what I've been thinking about in the future is a lot of this idea of trust and community partnerships. So thinking about ways in which people can not only meet different people, expand their networks, diversify, but make it so institutions are having meaningful dialogue with their constituents, their local communities, and they feel the local communities feel heard. The institutions are, talking with them, addressing their needs. And then hopefully, this is the ideal, maybe optimistic way, is that if we can kind of restructure and learn from a lot of these failures of institutions and have this cultural norm of working with each other, then you'd have these experts and scientists listening to people in their communities and working with them. So it's not so much of this like outside group telling us what to do. It's like, oh, that's a scientist. I know them. They're not evil. They just study this weird thing. They're a big nerd, and we can help each other solve whatever problem we're interested in. So it's kind of interesting that as we get more and more technologically advanced, I think the in-person human connection is only going to be more critical.
And I know we
So
need to get you out of here shortly, but speaking of technological advancement, we have AI now that's
Mhm.
sort of, I'd say it's pervasive in our daily lives. I think we'll all let's just assume we all agree that it's going to be a real thing going forward. But I'd like you to let us know what's your biggest fear with AI as it relates to misinformation, and what's your greatest hope, or what gives you most optimism about it?
One of my biggest worries is that it's going to accelerate the decline of trust in each other and institutions. It's going to be an amplifier for a lot of the problems we already see. It's going to be an amplifier for inequalities. The people who use it and use it well are going to be more and more successful. The people who don't know how to use it well are going to fall further behind. So it's like a lot of other technologies where the people who use it and keep up with it, can do well. Like AI, I think, is a positive tool for many things. I think that like it has, you can see a lot of promise with it. And so some of the promise in regards to fact checking and evaluating information at scale is interesting, is that it can save people a lot of work for um, trying to balance that asymmetry that we talked about before. It's like it's really easy to share a bunch of falsehoods and see them go viral. It's really hard to do the difficult work of fact checking. So if you can balance that scale a little bit with automation, then I think that's a potential positive. Um, I do think that the optimistic side of AI could be that it reduces the amount of work that humans have to do, and that might mean we all have more free time. Like that's kind of the utopian kind of thing, is like, hey, like maybe actually this reduces the amount of total labor required of humans, and we collectively will have more time to, you know, do art or just be with our friends and family and just enjoy life. So I do think there's a lot of promise of artificial intelligence uh, as far as helping us be more efficient. But again, I do worry that it's going to um, be used in very nefarious ways, very successfully. So it's going to be constantly being mindful of the limitations of AI in the future as well. So part of that, like digital literacy, is understanding these limitations of artificial intelligence. But again, it's going to be interesting to see just like as we go forward. I feel like there's going to be so much AI slop in the internet that I think people are going to like turn away from the internet because they know it's just all this homogenized junk that we almost just want to go back to like meeting in person again. So it might be this like pendulum shift.
and Matthew, we are getting close to time here, but I just want to share an observation with you because
Sure.
you're the burgeoning generation that kind of came into their own during the pandemic. And you have brought up personal connection as a solution to a lot of these issues repeatedly during this conversation. And I'm just saying, sitting from my seat, that's kind of an interesting observation that, coming from the pre-pandemic world where that interaction was much more frequent. And
Hmm.
I do think that we're actually seeing the influence of your specific cohort that came through a period of time where that was limited at a very important time of development,
Hmm.
and what the outcome of that is. So I'm fascinated by the way you talk. Like that's very interesting to observe in kind of that's interesting kind of way. So and maybe that's going to be part of that rebellion against that lack of contact at that certain point of that cohort, the rebellion against that, leading us back to desire for that connection is going to be the superpower that helps shape, whatever this next chapter is.
Yeah, thank you. I hope so. I hope we can learn from these lessons and I can have some small role in helping shift the conversation forward in a way that is productive. Yeah, I do think the social, I mean, that's my whole thing is the social really matters. And even though we're getting away with it, away from it in some ways, I think it's going to hopefully help us get back on track,
Yeah.
if we can be thoughtful about it.
With your new position as czar of social media,
Yeah, that'd be interesting. But yeah.
So Matthew, thanks again for joining us today. Your book, Misguided, it's available now, is it?
It is. The official date was actually July 8th, but it's already in bookstores and in Amazon already. So people are actually getting it and like tagging me like, "Hey, I just saw your book." Like I didn't even know my book was there. So, yes, it's available. Amazon, I think, actually has a sale for the ebook right now, which is cool. And then directly from the Columbia Press website, if you use the CUP20 discount code, you can get the paper copy for 20% off. So there's some pre-order bonuses before the official release date, even though it's people are already getting the copies now.
There you go, a little bonus for our listeners. And is there
Yeah.
anything else related to your work, current research, anything else that you'd like to highlight that people should check out if they want to hear more?
So I do have a newsletter and a podcast, also called Misguided to fit within my brand. So I interview people who are studying misinformation very broadly on my podcast, or media literacy, or how people process information. I get a variety of guests on there, so that's been fun. And then I summarize a lot of current work in the misinformation research landscape on my Substack, my newsletter. So if people are interested in that, they can follow my Substack and all my information also on my website, and I'm on various social media platforms too.
Beautiful, beautiful. People should definitely check that out. And I think as I reflect on our conversation today, it kind of reinforces some of the things that Colin and I talk about all the time in terms of the information that's out there, the way that we should be thinking about it critically, fact checking it, evaluating it, pre-bunking it,
Mhm.
doing lateral reading, doing
Yeah.
all these things to make sure that we're staying on top of the right information at the right times and avoiding the pitfalls of using this misinformation, especially as it comes to our finances. So here on Barenaked Money, we'll keep pushing that forward. And thanks again for joining us today, Matthew. It's been really awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was great being on here with you guys.
If your current financial advisor cannot explain how they and their firm are compensated, that's a problem. They really should be able to answer that question before you accept their advice. And if their answers leave you with more questions than confidence, it might be time to seek advice that aligns with your best interests. Contact us. No strings attached. You can find us at annoyingthecompetition.com. For more information on the subject of today's podcast or any other financial topic, please visit us online at verecan.com. That's verecan.com. There's plenty of information there, or you can reach out to someone on the team. Thanks for listening. Please note, the information provided in this podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended as financial, investment, legal, tax, accounting, or other professional advice. Our discussions are not a solicitation to buy or sell any securities or to make any specific investments. Any decisions, based on information contained in this podcast, are the sole responsibility of the listener. We strongly advise consulting with a professional financial advisor before making any financial decisions. Listeners should be aware that investing involves risks and that past performance is not indicative of future results. Barenaked Money is produced by Verecan Capital Management Inc., a licensed portfolio management company in Canada. We operate under the regulatory framework established by the provincial securities commissions in the provinces within which we operate. The views expressed in the podcast are our own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any regulatory authority. Remember, at Verecan Capital Management Inc., we focus on aligning our goals with yours, prioritizing integrity and transparency. For more information about us and our services, please visit our website. Thank you for listening, and let's continue to challenge the norms of the financial services industry together.